Welcome back to MHS Midnight Horror Stories. I know that many of you come to these videos as a gentle way to unwind before drifting off to sleep. So, before you close your eyes tonight, could I ask you for one small favor? Just leave me a quick interaction, a comment, a like, or maybe share where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Little actions like that help YouTube recognize the content and spread it to more people who might enjoy it. My current goal is to reach around 300 likes within the first 24 hours. Now then, let's step into tonight's chilling stories together. This story happened in late 2020 during the COVID lockdown in the UK in the town of Renfrew near Glasgow Airport. On that cold, misty evening, Kiran Chahal, a woman in her late 20s, was on her way to work at her family's Indian restaurant, which had been very well known in Renfrew before the pandemic. Everyone in the area knew the place, and her family was proud of it. Kiran usually worked the evening shift with her brother and sister. Due to road closures, she had to take a quieter, narrow detour to get there. Her next-door neighbor was a man in his 50s who had rented the house next to hers the previous year. Her family didn't know much about him, but over the past week or so, it seemed like someone else had started staying with him. Kiran noticed that this guest often gave her unpleasant, uncomfortable looks whenever she entered or left her house. His stares made her feel unsafe and tense, especially when she knew he was outside. That evening, as Kiran stepped out of her house, the man spoke to her directly for the first time, and what he said made her skin crawl. "Hey, Ms. Chahal, I'm Alec. Just wanted to say you look amazing in those leather pants." Kiran was wearing leather pants simply because they were warm in the freezing weather, but the way he said it was disgusting. She later said that when she glanced back, she saw him scanning her from head to toe, as if she were an object. She was too stunned to respond. How could that be the first thing someone ever said to you, she thought. She quickly got into her car, but nausea welled up as she realized he was still staring at her, unblinking. That gaze seemed to last forever. Worse yet, she had to defrost the windshield before driving. Her parents and siblings were already at the restaurant, so there was no one home she could turn to for safety. Then she realized something worse. She had forgotten her phone. Sitting in the car, she debated whether to go back in or just leave. But thinking she would need her phone at work, she decided to run in quickly to grab it. She opened the car door, rushed inside, and noticed Alec was no longer standing there. A wave of relief washed over her. At least she wouldn't have to deal with another creepy stare or comment. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. After no more than 30 seconds, just enough to grab her phone, she was about to head out again when she heard a sound near the front door. The house was dimly lit, and that noise made her heart skip a beat. But seeing nothing, she told herself it was probably just nerves after what had happened earlier. She locked the door, got back in the car, and started driving toward the restaurant. The road was deserted due to lockdown. Barely any cars, barely any people. 2 minutes after leaving her neighborhood, she felt the car start to shake slightly. She pulled over, got out, and saw the back left tire had gone flat. But what horrified her was that it hadn't just deflated, it had been slashed. With her phone in hand, she was about to call for help when a car suddenly appeared behind her, headlights on full beam, shining directly at her. The light was so intense, she had to turn her face away. Seconds later, she heard a car door slam and a gloved hand clamp tightly over her mouth from behind. Kiran said her eyes instantly filled with tears. Her panicked breaths were visible in the cold night air. Her lips trembled behind the glove, but she was too shocked to scream or bite. Then she heard a familiar voice. "All right, Miss Chahal, hands behind your back." It was Alec. In complete panic, Kiran followed the command, placing her hands behind her. The gloved hand left her mouth, only to be replaced by a rag. Then came the unmistakable sound of tape. He was binding her hands behind her back with duct tape. He turned her around and pressed her back against the boot of the car. Tears streamed down her face as she was forced to look into his eyes. Alec removed the rag and immediately placed a long strip of duct tape over her mouth. Kieran tried to scream and beg through the gag, but it only came out as muffled cries. Alec crouched down and began taping her ankles together. In the freezing night air, her breath from her nose looked like steam rising from a kettle. Alec then walked to the front of her car and switched off the engine. As he returned, Kieran realized the tape on her ankles wasn't as tight as the others, so she kicked her legs hard, breaking it free. Alec didn't notice. As he came around the back, she gathered all her strength and launched a powerful kick straight into his groin, letting out a muffled grunt. He screamed, doubled over, and she kicked again, this time hitting his face and knocking him to the ground. Kieran rubbed her gagged mouth against her shoulder until the tape peeled off. Then she pushed her bound hands down past her feet to bring them to the front and bit through the tape to free herself. Gasping for breath, she picked up her phone, which had fallen during the attack, and called the police and her family. The police arrived and arrested Alec. He was charged with attempted kidnapping and assault. Later, it was discovered that Alec hadn't legally rented the house next door. He had been secretly living in Kieran's neighbor's home while the real tenant was away staying with family during the lockdown. Alec wasn't even his real name. He knew Kieran's name because he'd been reading delivery labels outside her door. Thankfully, Kieran had taken self-defense classes a few months earlier, something she believed saved her life. Though she had to undergo long-term therapy after the ordeal, she eventually recovered. Her family's restaurant was sold during the pandemic, but for them, the most important thing was that Kieran was still alive and safe. My name is Jessica, and I am 22 years old. But what happened when I was only 7 still remains a ghost that haunts me every Christmas season. That year, my mother took me to a Walmart supermarket. Everywhere was bright with lights and filled with music. When we finished shopping, we walked toward our car in the parking lot. I saw a man dressed as Santa Claus. His suit wasn't new and seemed a little dirty compared to other Santas I'd seen. But I didn't pay any attention to that. I was eager to ask my mom if I could go talk to him. My mother seemed hesitant, looking at him with a suspicious gaze. Finally, she said, "Okay, but talk fast." I didn't wait for her to finish speaking before running up and hugging him. The conversation was just innocent children's questions about the North Pole and Christmas presents. "How are you?" "Very well. I'm happy to meet you." "What do you and Mrs. Claus do on non-Christmas days?" "It's simple. We prepare for the next Christmas." "Thank you for the gifts. I'll come back to bring you more, little angel. At midnight, Santa promises." Before I could ask anything else, Mom quickly pulled me away toward the car, her face full of tension. At the time, I didn't understand what was going on. On the way out of the mall, both of us were silent. Halfway there, I noticed a black car following us, maintaining a certain distance. I asked my mom if anything was wrong, but she only replied in an unnatural tone. "Dinner is getting cold. Your grandparents are waiting." When we got home, I saw the black car slowly driving by again. That Christmas Eve, my grandparents, parents, and siblings were all there. We exchanged gifts, and the atmosphere was warm with laughter. Mom didn't bring up the afternoon incident, so I didn't ask about it either. Close to midnight, my grandparents left, and everyone went to bed. Mom kissed me on the forehead and wished me good night, but I didn't sleep. I waited a few minutes, then secretly opened my bedroom door, tiptoed downstairs, and sat next to the Christmas tree, eagerly awaiting Santa's midnight promise. When the clock struck exactly 12 o'clock, I heard a very light knock on the living room window. I looked out, and he was standing there. It was still the Santa from the parking lot. In his hand was a large bag. He signaled for silence and walked toward the front door. I walked over and looked outside. Instead of a sleigh, there was the black car. But as a child, I didn't see anything wrong. I ran to open the door. "Here's your gift," he said, opening the large bag. I thought he was going to hand me a gift, but no. He held the bag so wide open that he seemed to want me to climb right inside. Right then, a cold, very wrong feeling spread all over me. Then I realized three things. The black car's headlights were off, the rear door was wide open, and there was another person sitting behind the wheel. I turned back to look at Santa. His face no longer held any trace of kindness. Just 2 seconds after I realized the horror, he forcefully shoved me into the rough canvas bag. I didn't have time to scream. I was too shocked to react. He dragged the heavy canvas bag toward the black car. All I could do was pray, begging for someone to wake up, begging for a Christmas miracle. And I got it. There were hurried footsteps, and the front door flew open. Suddenly, another pair of hands grabbed the bag, pulling it back with greater force. Then a loud tearing sound ripped through the air. The bag had been ripped open. I will never forget the look in my dad's eyes as he pulled me into his arms, a mix of anger, terror, and extreme relief. If Dad had caught the guy, he would have surely killed him. The black car immediately sped away, its rear door still open. Back inside the house, Mom held me tight, crying and trembling. When the police arrived, she recounted everything, especially the black car that had followed us from the mall. The kidnappers wore masks so they couldn't be identified. But my mother remembered the license plate very clearly. We later learned the car was stolen from the very parking lot where we had met Santa. The police later found the abandoned car deep in the woods, but the men still haven't been found. Every time I think about that night, I shiver. If Dad had been 1 second slower, I would have been gone forever. It was the worst Christmas of my life. And even now, I still don't know what those men intended to do with me. But I know that to them, Santa Claus wasn't a giver of gifts. He was someone who took things away. When I grew up, I became a safety skills teacher. I don't want any child to experience the horrific breakdown of trust that I almost had to endure.
I'm Charity, just starting college. I started working part-time in my second semester to make some extra cash for tuition and living expenses. My parents said they could afford it, but I was stubborn and pretty independent, so I always did my own thing. My first job was working as a sales clerk at Target. I was excited when I got the job, but that excitement didn't last long when I saw the schedule. I had to work 2 night shifts a week. Since the store had to handle a ton of holiday shoppers, it was pretty much open 24/7. I wasn't a fan of the whole night shift thing at all. The quiet and darkness always freaked me out a bit, but I told myself I needed the money, and it was a chance to get used to adulting. On my first night working the night shift, I went to the store feeling both excited and nervous. The store at night felt totally different from during the day. The shelves were all neat, and the soft yellow lights from the ceiling were spread out, but the silence made it feel like everything was frozen. I started my shift like usual, fixing things customers left in the wrong spot, cleaning the shelves, and checking the stock. Everything was going pretty smoothly, nothing too crazy. Time dragged on, and by the time it hit midnight, I was starting to feel worn out. Leaning on the cashier counter, I tried not to let my eyes shut. It was way too quiet, just the hum of the AC and a few customers strolling by. Out of nowhere, a guy walked up. He was wearing a white shirt, pants, and had his hair all neat and combed. He looked really put together. but his intense stare and serious face kind of made me feel uneasy. He introduced himself as the store manager and told me to head to the back to organize the stock. I hesitated since it was my first time meeting him, but his serious look made me too nervous to say no. I nodded and quickly headed to the warehouse like he asked. On my way, I ran into another guy coming toward me. He was in a store uniform and gave me a curious look. I told him what the manager asked me to do. His face totally changed in an instant. He took off the name tag around his neck, showing he was actually the real manager of the store. A chill ran down my spine. Who was that guy? The manager told me to turn around and point out the other guy. As soon as we stepped into the main hall, the light suddenly went out. The whole store was swallowed up by darkness. In a split second, the quiet place turned into chaos. Customers were whispering, some were yelling, and it felt like pure panic. I just stood there in the dark, my heart racing, not sure what to do next. Then, there was a loud bang, a gunshot. I crouched down, my body shaking. I ducked low, trying to find somewhere to hide. My hand brushed against a shelf, so I crawled between the boxes and tried to stay quiet. In the dark, I could hear footsteps running, echoing all around. The screams, the sound of stuff crashing, and the brutal gunshots kept going, totally freaking me out. Sweat was dripping down my forehead and back, but I didn't dare move too much. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. While trying to dial 911, I had to use both hands to keep the phone from slipping out of my grip. My voice was shaking, and I kept stumbling over my words as I explained what was going on. About 10 minutes later, I heard police sirens outside the store. The flashing red and blue lights peeked through the gaps in the shelves, giving me a bit of hope. But I still didn't dare move. I just had to sit there and wait. The police loudspeaker blared, telling everyone to stay calm and not move. I could hear their footsteps, their orders, and they started clearing each area. After about an hour, things started to calm down. I stepped out of my hiding spot, my legs shaking and my mind racing with fear. The police led the staff and customers out one by one. I found out that a group of young guys had planned to rob the store. The guy in the white shirt was their distraction, making it easy for them to carry out their plan. They used the darkness to grab phones, wallets, and valuables from customers. A few security guards got hurt trying to stop them, but luckily, no one died. 2 days later, the police caught the group of guys with help from security cameras and witness statements. I felt relieved that it was all over. But every time I closed my eyes, I could still hear gunshots, screams, and feel the darkness closing in on me. I was so shaken up that I couldn't go to the store or any crowded places to shop for years after that. It was a night I never wanted to go through again. Who would have thought my first shift would turn into such a nightmare?
I'm Oscar, 30 years old. I lived with my paternal grandmother since I was 5. In my small memory from that time, I don't remember everything exactly. I remember that I used to live in a different house with my parents. The memory is fragmented. Afterwards, I was moved to live with my grandmother. The reason for moving houses was later explained to me by my grandmother. Because my parents had jobs far away, and it wasn't convenient to take me along. Life with Grandma was also very happy. To her, I was everything. At first, I would often cry at night because I missed my mom. Every time I received a call from my parents, I would also cry. By the time I was about 6 or 7 years old, when I began to understand things a bit more, I asked my grandmother many questions about everything around me. The familiar spot at the dining table was that I sat on the left side while my grandmother sat in the middle. Suddenly, I felt that something was missing. The scene before me was very familiar. It was the spot where I was sitting and the same dishes on the table. But there was something missing. Grandma, where's Alvin? That name suddenly popped into my mind, like a spring being released after being tightly compressed. My grandmother was stunned for a few seconds and said, "Do you mean Buddy? Isn't he over there enjoying a snack?" "No, I mean Alvin. I remember there was someone who used to sit and eat with us." "There's no one, dear. Hurry and eat before the food gets cold." Grandmother's face became serious as she continued eating. I didn't know how to explain that hazy memory to her. As time went on, I began to remember more images and fragmented memories of Alvin. In every corner of the house, in every nook and cranny. To be honest, I can't remember his face, and I'm not sure if Alvin actually existed. Whenever I remembered something, I would always ask my grandmother, "I'm fed up with that name Alvin already, Oscar. It might just be your imaginary friend." But I didn't think so. The feeling about Alvin was very real. He was completely different from my imaginary friends. Whenever my parents came to visit, I was very happy because there would be lots of toys and sweets. "Mom, do you know Alvin?" Hearing my question, my mother was stunned and stared at me. You remember Alvin?" I nodded innocently, continuing to chew on candy while telling my mother about it. "Not much. I just remember his name and that he seemed to have been here before." My mother quickly placed her hand on my shoulder and turned me to face her. "Do you remember where Alvin went?" "No. Do you know Alvin?" "Don't eat too many candies, Oscar. They're not good for your teeth and digestion." Grandmother appeared and interrupted my conversation with my mother. I ran over to show grandmother the items my mother had brought for me. "Candies again?" Grandmother looked at my mother with a somewhat irritated tone. My mother pulled me away, saying she would take me to the playground while my father stayed behind to talk with my grandmother. I was very happy on the days when my parents came to visit. Many times I asked my parents to either take me and grandmother with them or to stay here with us. My mother agreed but asked me to wait a little longer. My parents left again, and I cried for a few days afterward because I missed them. But with grandmother by my side, things were okay again. One time I brought a school friend home to play after school. I proudly showed him grandmother's baked cheesecake. Grandmother smiled and told us to play only in the indoor area in the backyard, and not to go outside or open the gate for strangers. We obediently followed her instructions, playing together in the backyard while we waited for grandmother to bake the cake. Bubby played with us. When the ball rolled to the end of the yard, I ordered Bubby to go get it, but he didn't come back. Instead of paying attention to the ball, he kept sniffing something under the apple tree. I guess that Bubby must have found a fallen apple or something. My friend and I ran over to call Bubby. Bubby suddenly started barking loudly and digging non-stop under the apple tree. I yelled at Bubby to stop, saying that this was the apple tree grandmother loved and that we'd be in big trouble if we messed with it. I quickly picked up Buddy, but he continued to bark persistently at the apple tree. "What's going on?" Grandmother's voice startled us. Normally she was very gentle, but even just frowning was enough to make me scared. Bubby was locked in the kennel, and my classmate and I ate the cheesecake with a sense of unease. "What did you see?" Grandmother asked us with a frown. "No, we just saw Bubby digging in the dirt." I quickly spoke up to explain for my friend. After that day, my friend stopped coming over to my house. Grandmother built a very tall fence around the apple tree herself without calling a contractor. Bubby was sent to a relative's house while I was at school. I cried and begged grandmother to bring Bubby back, but her answer was no. One time I saw a car and several police officers at the neighbor's house. I quickly ran back to ask grandmother and found out that the neighbor's family had reported their youngest son missing. It seemed like I had seen this scene somewhere before. The police car, the sounds of crying, and the missing person information. All of it felt eerily familiar and vividly real. Had the police ever come to our house, Grandma? I remember it seems like... Stop saying meaningless things, Oscar. Come inside right away. Grandmother interrupted me and completely changed her demeanor. After that, I didn't question anything with grandmother anymore. I was afraid of seeing her displeased. When I finished elementary school, my mother came to pick me up and we left. I missed grandmother a lot and felt sorry that she had to live alone. When I was nearing the end of middle school, grandmother passed away from a stroke that wasn't treated in time. My family hurried back that night to prepare for her funeral. Looking back at the house with so many pictures and memories of grandma woven into every corner, I can't stop crying. The apple tree in the backyard is heavy with ripe red fruit, falling all over the ground because no one is there to pick them. The fence grandma built with her own hands has almost completely fallen down. Under the apple tree, a skull with half exposed, half buried in the ground. I looked carefully, and once I was certain of what I had seen, I rushed into the house to call my parents. Dad immediately ran to the backyard, while Mom collapsed right where she stood, gasping for breath. "Alvin! Alvin!" Mom kept murmuring that name in shock, ignoring all the questions I asked. Suddenly, Mom sprang up, dashed toward the garden, and screamed the name Alvin out loud. Kneeling under the apple tree, Mom kept sobbing and frantically digging up the earth. Dad tried to stop Mom, but he was met with a series of painful blows from her. Dad told me to go inside and call the police with the ambulance. The scene repeated once again. The police car arrived at my house, and the crying. Yes, it was definitely Mom's crying. My mom was given a sedative by the medical staff and fell asleep, leaving only Dad to deal with the police. Under the apple tree, the police uncovered the remains of a 6-year-old boy and confirmed it was Alvin, my half-brother. That's why I always have fragments of memories of playing with him. Alvin went missing when I was a little over 4. The police also came to my house to investigate. Mom's desperate crying filled the air, and I stood in the room terrified, watching from the inside. Not being able to find him caused my mom to suffer from a severe mental crisis. Dad took me to live with Grandma, so Mom could have time to receive treatment. So Alvin had been lying there alone for 12 years, witnessing me playing and growing up every day. Grandma's no longer here, and everyone knows this is connected to her. But the reason remains unknown to everyone. I'm Ethan. I graduated from the University of California, Berkeley. Looking back, my college years were pretty smooth. I joined a fraternity, got good grades, and had a great time dating. I still keep in touch with a lot of my fraternity brothers. I recently got engaged to Lily, who also went to Berkeley. There's one experience from my freshman year that I think about a lot. It was a big lesson for me when I was looking for a job. I felt pretty lost at the beginning of college. Everything was new. It seemed like everyone around me was so confident, like they had it all figured out. As a freshman, I quickly felt the pressure to have my long-term career planned out. This seems early for an 18-year-old. But it was the norm at my school at the time. If you wanted to go into business, you pretty much had to have an amazing LinkedIn profile. I remember feeling so stressed trying to build a professional image online. It felt like my future depended on who I connected with and what skills I listed on my profile. Anyway, I got everything done that I needed to. I started to look for an internship for the summer after my freshman year. Before long, I got a message that really caught my attention. It was from a respected business company. They expressed interest in my profile. It wasn't an automated message. The text was clearly written. It showed they had looked at my profile and actually wanted to reach out to me. I read the message at least 6 times before I replied. After a day and a few short emails, I was invited to a first-round interview. I spent hours researching the company and preparing for the interview. I practiced every single practice question I could find. Soon after, I got a message from a man named Adrian Kowalski. It's a name I'll remember for the rest of my life. He said that he would be the one interviewing me. The first thing I did was look him up online. But my excitement quickly turned to confusion. I searched all over LinkedIn for Adrian's profile,
Strangely, I couldn't find anything. No career or social media profiles. I just brushed it off. I figured maybe he just wanted to stay private. Adrian and I agreed on a time and place for the interview. It was at a coffee shop. This is when I started to feel uneasy. Why wasn't the interview at the school or a library? We had endless perfect places to do an interview right there in our college town. So I was confused. Still, the address online looked pretty normal, so I didn't think much of it. The day before the interview, I told my friend Noah about the situation. He was even more confused than I was. He said the situation seemed shady. I agreed with him, but I thought the position was worth the risk. Noah offered to drive me to the interview since he was free that day. Of course, I agreed and was very grateful. It was around 4 p.m. on the day of the interview. Noah drove to my dorm. I was so nervous. This was my first interview ever. After about 20 minutes of driving, I told Noah to drop me off at the end of the street. I would walk the rest of the way to the coffee shop. Noah offered to wait. I felt so lucky to have such a supportive and kind friend. I walked a few minutes to the location and just stopped in my tracks. I looked up at the construction site in front of me. There was no coffee shop. Even weirder, the whole area was not residential. I was confused. I double-checked my phone and confirmed that I was at the right location. I figured maybe Google Maps just hadn't updated that this place was being rebuilt. I was about to call Noah, but before I could, a voice called out behind me. I spun around. A tall man in a nice suit was standing there. He had a silver Bentley next to him. I felt relieved. Thank goodness I hadn't just left, but his presence felt so out of place with the abandoned surroundings. He walked toward me. He looked confused, too. We shook hands. When I asked him about the construction site, he acted just as surprised as me. He frowned. He put a hand on his chin. Then he said, "Let's find somewhere else. Get in." He turned back toward his car. "The front seat is yours," he called back. I followed him with a sense of excitement I couldn't contain. I opened the door and got inside the car. I saw there was another man already in the car. He looked at me and gave a friendly smile. I saw that he had his hand in his coat pocket. I saw something that looked like a gun. I started to panic. Everything in my head was just so scrambled. This was clearly a trap. I turned around and ran as fast as I could away from the car. I heard the man call my name behind me, but I didn't even look back. The car was turning around. It was heading in my direction. I had to think fast. There was no way I could outrun a car. The streets around me were a maze. There was nowhere to hide. I felt fear spread all through me. I came to an intersection. I had to choose to go left or right. Logically, left was closer. But my feet went right. I ran across the street and down the block. I knew I was running out of time. Luckily, there was a building ahead with a fire escape low enough for me to jump on. I used all my strength. I ran and grabbed onto the ladder. I had never done a pull-up in my life. I knew this was a matter of life or death. I started to climb, one rung at a time. I didn't stop. The Bentley whipped around the corner and came to a stop in front of the building. I couldn't see the driver, but I knew he was looking at me. There was nothing else I could do. If they chose to come after me, I would have to fight. The car sat there for another moment. Then, it sped off down the road, turned left, and never reappeared. I couldn't breathe. I pulled out my phone and called Noah. I was practically screaming into the phone about what had happened. I stayed on the fire escape until he found me. I got in the car. We drove away in silence. The aftermath of that whole situation was pretty minor. I know for sure that they were scammers. I told my story on student forums to remind everyone to be careful. I also told all my student friends. No matter how hard I try to forget, there are times, like now, when I can recall every terrifying detail of what almost was the last day of my life. Now, I'm about to start a family. I have a stable, maybe even a little rich job. The experience taught me a powerful lesson. Always be aware question things, and listen to your gut.
I'm Isaac, 28, and I live in San Antonio, Texas. Born and raised in Texas, I and everyone around here were proud of Whataburger. It's like a state symbol. I was hooked on Whataburger. Everything on the menu drove me wild. Thanks to that obsession, I'd got a bit of a hefty look, 6'2" and 264 pounds. Even though I was kind of self-conscious about it, I just couldn't change how I eat. Eating Whataburger got me more hyped and happy than anything, so it was on my menu at least once a day. I moved at the end of last summer just to be close to a Whataburger. Since then, my once toned body turned into what it is now in just 4 months. I knew every location, recognized all the faces, and was tight with the owner and staff. One thing that was special about the Whataburger near my place was it was packed with other folks who were also pretty heavy. They came to eat every day too, and we'd become this special group the owner really liked. Out of everyone, I was tight with this guy my age named David, who also moved close just for this place, like I did. David showed me his pics from just 5 months ago. "Man, you were in perfect shape. I mean, used to be." I blurted out when I saw those pics, and we both cracked up. "Yeah, but after that first taste of the sandwiches and burgers here, I got totally hooked," David said with a hint of regret. Me, David, and a bunch of others in the group all felt the same way. But we were not trying to lose weight. Not being able to eat Whataburger would be pure torture. Just so you know, the store owner weighed close to 400 pounds. A few months later, my life totally changed when I met Glenda, my first real crush after a bunch of unrequited love. Glenda's cute and lives a healthy, balanced life. She also hooked me up with a diet and kicked off my weight loss journey for real. I had to cut back on how many days I was eating Whataburger each week, and it was honestly brutal. Me or that burger? Glenda shot me a look when she spotted the beef burger I had secretly bought on the table. "Come on, Glenda, just this one." "I'm running out of patience," she cut in, growling when I tried to plead. After picking it up, I had to toss the burger away, and it hurt like hell. David's messages and calls were piling up because I'd been MIA more often. I had to spill the beans to David. Not being able to eat at the Whataburger near my place really messed up my mood and personality. It was awful. I was always bummed out, restless, and felt stuck. There was a point when my heart was racing, and I totally lost control of my actions. I yelled at Glenda and started smashing stuff around the house. I even threatened to off myself if she didn't get me Whataburger. "Isaac, are you crazy?" Glenda yelled, squeezing my hand. I got a headache and felt dizzy. Everything in front of me was spinning. The phone rang, and it was someone from my Whataburger addict group. "Isaac, David just passed away." That hit me like a ton of bricks, but my heart started racing like crazy. Glenda and I rushed over to David's place, and the police were already there. David's body was right at the entrance. His face was all purple, and he was stiff with his mouth wide open and eyes staring. Inside David's house, police found a ton of trash, mostly food and Whataburger cans everywhere. In David's airway, the forensics team pulled out a bunch of food that wasn't chewed right, and a piece of a chicken bone, which caused him to choke and die. The autopsy showed that David had been exposed to some addictive stuff found in the food at Whataburger. The addictive stuff built up over a bunch of days, making David's appetite go wild and totally out of control. Right after David died, 5 more people from the group ended up in the hospital
in really bad shape. Police went to the Whataburger to check things out and found the owner's decomposing body in the back room. To rake in a ton of cash from the store's huge monthly sales, he mixed in some addictive stuff with the ingredients. David, I, and a bunch of other folks with the same interests, eating habits, and big appearances are his success. We wasted our money making that bastard rich while also buying ourselves the disease that was wrecking our bodies every single day. I was in shock and totally crushed. The next few days were just hell. I was going through therapy, detox, and trying to lose weight all at once. But thanks to Glenda, my rock and support, I pulled it off. I had to go through a bunch more surgeries after losing weight, but when I looked in the mirror, I just broke down in tears like I'd been reborn. Today, Glenda and I went to visit David's grave to tell him about the wedding we were planning. I found out that my grandfather, my dad, and the devil were actually the same person. I'm Melvin, and I'm 17. I've lived with my grandparents and Aunt Sam since I was little, and I've never met my parents. I've always felt loved by my grandmother and Aunt Sam, but not by my grandfather. I feel like there's always been a gap between me and my grandfather that just can't be closed. He's never really shown me any words of care or loving gestures. When I was 10, I used to run home from the bus stop all excited. The sound of kids crying left me feeling really confused. When I walked into the living room, I saw my grandmother holding a baby wrapped in a blanket, and she was crying too. "Come here, Melvin. This is your little brother, Henry." I was really curious. As a 10-year-old, I had a lot of questions, like why I suddenly had a younger brother, and whether he was born by our mother, Carrie.
You're not allowed to ask questions that go against any instructions from adults.
My grandfather's voice sounded really annoyed when he heard my questions. Aunt Sam quickly pulled me over to see my brother, but I was in tears because I felt sorry for myself and didn't really feel anything for Henry. I stayed in the room that my grandmother said was my mom's room, and Henry stayed with my grandparents since he was too young. I asked my grandmother about my parents many times, but she just smiled with a red, tearful face. My grandmother always told me to keep the room just as it was, down to the smallest details. The picture showed a very young and beautiful woman, and my grandmother said that that was my mother, Carrie. I don't have any information about my father, and neither do my grandparents. I don't share many traits with my mother, but resemble my grandfather more, and I really don't like that. I've had insomnia since I was a kid, probably around 7 or 8 years old, because of all the different noises. Sometimes it was the laughter of kids, and other times it was the crying and scolding. I could never quite pinpoint where it was coming from. I told my grandmother everything because she always listened to me.
Stop making up stories and asking for things.
My grandfather's voice sounded annoyed when he overheard me telling my grandmother that the room needed better soundproofing. My grandmother didn't have much of a say in the house because she didn't work. The whole family relied on my grandfather's salary for all the expenses. I saw my grandfather get angry with her many times, even throwing away the dinner she had just made because she mentioned my mother. She wanted him to spend some money to hire a detective to find my mother, Carrie. My grandfather didn't seem to care about my mother, so I could kind of understand why he didn't show much love for my siblings and me. Because I was really afraid of my grandfather and didn't want to cause any trouble for my grandmother, I tried to put up with those noises for many years. Sometimes, hearing the laughter of the kids made me laugh too. I also have a younger brother, Henry, but we always had to follow my grandfather's strict rules, so we were all pretty closed off. As I grew up, I always planned to visit my mother and ask her why she didn't bring my brothers and me along, or why she never came to visit us. One day, the family dinner took a serious turn when my grandfather announced that he was at risk of losing his job. At night, I heard the two adults arguing about money and some illness, along with the sound of a child crying. I put a pillow over my ears, but I couldn't block out the annoying noise. It sounds like it's Grandpa. I sat up and walked around the room, trying to find a spot where I could hear the noise as clearly as possible. The woman's scream was really loud, and then the argument stopped. I had a lot of doubt about the man's voice. For almost a week now, the noise I've been hearing every night is a mix of a child crying and a woman's soothing voice. Of course I can't sleep. The child's crying might mean they're uncomfortable or sick. I know this from seeing my grandmother take care of Henry when he was little. She gently held Henry, comforted him, and sang him a lullaby with a worried and tired expression. A noise that sounded like a door opening came from right outside. I quietly went to open the door, and it was my grandfather. He must be thirsty. I figured that since there was a bathroom in my grandparents' bedroom, he wouldn't use the one in the living room. I followed him down to the living room, and instead of turning right to go to the kitchen, my grandfather turned left. I kept a safe distance so he wouldn't notice me, and kept following him. My grandfather went into the basement. I waited until he was inside, then I hurriedly followed him. But by the time I got to the basement, my grandfather had disappeared. I walked around looking for him but couldn't find him, and I started wondering if I was dreaming. I decided to sit in a hidden corner and wait, and eventually I fell asleep. The sound like a lock made me jump awake. I was surprised when my grandfather appeared out of nowhere and left the basement. I didn't tell my grandmother, but decided to keep an eye on my grandfather for a few more days. For the next 3 days, my grandfather didn't do anything out of the ordinary and didn't go to the basement again. I was tormented by the sound of a little girl crying and the woman's constant cursing. In her scolding and cursing, she mentioned Mark, my grandfather. I grew more and more curious about my grandfather and was sure he was hiding some kind of secret. On the fourth night, I saw my grandpa pulling back a shelf in the basement, and it opened up to another basement behind it. While I was still in shock, my grandpa led a woman holding a little girl, and they both ran out of the basement in a hurry. The woman's face looked a lot like my mom's. I didn't really react, and I'm not sure what I was feeling at that moment. I just stayed in that corner of the basement until the next morning. The police, along with my grandparents, Aunt Sam, and the woman who looked like my mom, came back. With the police urging him on, my grandpa reopened the door to the other basement. 4 more people came out one by one, all calling the woman Mom and my grandpa Dad. My grandmother immediately collapsed and gasped. I ran over to hug her, and everyone was surprised. The strange woman looked at me, burst into tears, and called my name. The whole truth about my parents, the 2 people I had been longing to see for 17 years, was finally revealed. The noises I heard every night were from my mom and my siblings, who had been living in a dark, cramped basement. My mom had been imprisoned for 24 years by her own father, someone I didn't know whether to call Dad or Grandpa. I had 7 siblings in total. It should have been 8, but one of them died because my mom was abused while she was 7 months pregnant. My grandfather took Henry and me upstairs because the basement was too cramped and told us that my mom had abandoned us. I can't forgive the person who committed this terrible crime, but he did create my 7 siblings. Mother Carrie endured extreme physical and mental pain. Even though she hated the person who took away her future and happiness, she always said that she loved and protected all of us at all costs. I love my mom and my other siblings a lot, for I'm the lucky one. I've decided to move on and live a new, happy life with my grandmother, Mother Carrie, Aunt Sam, and my 6 siblings. But I never stopped wondering why my grandfather did such horrible things to his own daughter. The story is based on a real-life event about the tragic life of a girl named Elizabeth Fritzl. Her real dad is Joseph Fritzl, a messed up, creepy guy. He started abusing his daughter Elizabeth when she was just 11. When Elizabeth was growing up, she tried to run away from her monster of a dad a bunch of times, but it never worked. For 7 years, starting when Elizabeth was 11, Joseph started working on turning the basement into a prison. On August 28, 1984, when Elizabeth was only 18, he drugged her and locked her up in the dark basement. He raped her every day, and after 24 years, Elizabeth had 7 kids with him, going through unimaginable pain and humiliation. In April 2008, Joseph finally let his oldest daughter, Kristen, who was really sick, go to the hospital. From there, the truth came out, and the whole world saw the face of a monster. My boyfriend won't let me eat anything except what he makes. Me and Lewis have been together for over a year. We've got a sweet relationship, going through all the ups and downs like any other couple. Lewis is super picky. Every single thing I eat has to be made by him, but honestly, I'm cool with it. One time he got home late from work, and instead of making him deal with cooking, I went ahead and made dinner myself. He came back super mad, grabbed the pan off the stove, and tossed the food I was cooking straight in the trash. Lewis yelled, "I'm telling you one last time, don't cook anything else." I was shocked. Yeah, my cooking's not as good as his, but he didn't have to act so crazy about it. I didn't talk to Lewis for 3 days after that, but he finally said sorry with a big home-cooked dinner, and we made up. We never go out to eat. We always just cook at home. Lewis won't buy food from the grocery store because he thinks it's from who knows where. He even brings his own food in a bag to company or family parties. A bunch of times, my friends told me to dump Lewis because they thought he was kind of messed up. Everything about Lewis was great, except for his weird eating habits. He was super caring and loyal, so I decided to just roll with it. But the more I tried, the weirder Lewis got. One weekend, he was out from the crack of dawn till late afternoon. He came home with a big bag, and his clothes were all stained with this dark red stuff that I was pretty sure was blood. Lewis said he couldn't trust the meat guy, so he went to the farm and asked the owner to butcher the animals right in front of him. "You're crazy, Lewis," I shouted at my boyfriend. He didn't say anything, just finished up the meat and stashed it in the freezer. That night, the sight of Lewis's bloody clothes and his blank face had me thinking a lot. Looking at my boyfriend next to me, I was like, did he just hit up the meat farm? But then I decided to just ignore where Lewis's meat was coming from. Right before Christmas, Lewis said his parents wanted us over for dinner, but he didn't want to go. But I really wanted to go, I'd never met his parents, and I wanted to ask them about Lewis's weird eating habits. After a whole day of bugging him, Lewis finally said yes. On Christmas Day, we were all set to roll out. I got all dressed up and put together a nice gift basket while Lewis was still in the kitchen whipping up dessert. As we pulled up in front of his house, Lewis kept telling me to only eat the stuff he made. I agreed to make it quick, and we both went into the house to a warm welcome from his parents. They were super classy, friendly, and loaded. During the meal, his parents and I were happily chatting while Lewis was quiet. I felt really rude for constantly turning down the food from his parents. When he stepped out to take a call, I had a little booze in me and totally forgot all about Lewis's rules. I tried the veggie salad while his parents were all happy and excited about it. It was awesome. I totally got where my boyfriend's cooking skills came from. When I asked why he had those weird eating habits, his mom just sighed. We used to have a maid, but she just vanished. That same day, we found out the food she made was poisonous. I guess that's why she took off. Ever since then, Lewis has been kind of freaked out. He learned to cook and makes all his own food now. I saw how helpless his parents were and just ended up understanding and loving my boyfriend even more. The problem was the booze was getting to me, so I secretly snuck some food from Lewis's parents' place, and I definitely couldn't let him find out. The next day, when Lewis went to work, I couldn't wait anymore. I grabbed the food his parents gave me last night, heated it up, and dug in. Just as I was almost done eating, I saw something in the food that made me choke. It was a human finger, like the pinky finger to be exact. I screamed and tossed the plate of food right on the ground. I crawled into the bathroom and kept throwing up for an hour until all that was coming up was just this bitter yellow stuff from my stomach. When Lewis got back, he rushed over, looking surprised, mad, and helpless. I asked to be taken to the hospital to get all that food out of my system, and Lewis jumped right on it. As soon as I got out of the hospital, I asked Lewis to take me to the farm where he got the meat, and he totally went along with it, no questions asked. After seeing the whole slaughtering process, I trusted my boyfriend. But after that Christmas, I just couldn't eat meat anymore. Lewis looked at me all helpless and said, "Maybe my parents' meat grinder is messed up again."
I am Martha, 32 years old, and a single mother. My 6-year-old daughter Sophie and I live in San Jose, one of the most expensive cities in the US. Our life is not a cozy life. You could say it's quite difficult. My husband passed away when Sophie was 4 years old due to a car accident. Sophie has a disease related to her eyes and needs surgery soon. Otherwise, it could affect her ability to see in the future. Although the government provided medical and educational support for us, the high cost of living in San Jose, combined with my unstable job situation, together, they forced me to work many long hours doing various jobs just to make ends meet. I have considered moving to another city to live, but there are many constraints that prevent us from doing so. One day when I picked Sophie up from school, I received bad news. My father had passed away suddenly that afternoon, with the initial cause determined to be a heart attack. I don't have many relatives. The only one I keep in touch with is my father, who was 67 years old and lived nearly 400 miles away from me. I arranged my work and took Sophie to her grandfather's house in Sacramento, California. After taking care of my father's funeral, I was scheduled to meet with his assistant to discuss some matters. The man name's Benny. He had worked for my father for nearly 20 years. Benny took me to my father's art gallery. My father was a painter. Benny introduced me to a painting of a stunning woman with a cold gaze looking straight ahead. She was bound with a golden chain I wasn't sure why, but I felt a cold chill running down my spine looking at that painting. Benny said that this painting was demanded by a wealthy businessman at a very high price. And now, since he'd passed away, I am the legal owner of this painting and countless other paintings my father left behind, as dictated by inheritance law. To be fair, I really didn't care much about my father's paintings, and I had always felt that way since I was little. After discussing and fixing a reasonable price with Benny, I decided to sell the painting. That would be a good sum to taking care for Sophie. However, the painting had a few minor defects due to not being properly maintained. The paint on the woman's eyes was peeling and needed to be repaired before it could be sold. Benny said he would hire a talented artist to quickly work on the painting. Sophie and I would stay here for a while until the sale was completed, also for her summer break. When I entered my old childhood room, a pleasant sense of nostalgia hit me all at once. The room had remained exactly the same for many years. The next morning, Benny brought a young painter named Logan. Logan analyzed a lot about the painting for me, but it's all yada yada to me at this point. I gave him a price and the time frame for him to finish the painting as soon as possible, and he agreed. As Logan began his work, I lingered back to see my father's final work. The woman's eyes in the painting were indeed beautiful, yet terrifying to look at. It felt as if she was staring right at me, no matter what angle I viewed her from. When I stared intently, suddenly those eyes moved. The woman in the picture just blinked at me. I jolted and called out to Logan in a panic. He turned to look at me, but when I looked back at the painting, it had returned to normal. Maybe it's just the trick of the eyes. When I returned to the house, I didn't see Sophie anywhere. I called out her name several times without anything back. I ran upstairs, and as soon as I entered the room, I saw Sophie sitting on the bed. I furiously asked her why she hadn't replied when she heard me calling. Sophie sat on the bed, trembling, her face pale, and she spoke in a muffled whisper. "There's someone under the bed." I stood frozen, staring at my daughter. Sophie looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears. I could no longer control my breathing. My mind thought this was just her childhood fear of being alone, but I didn't act decisively. I bent down lower toward the underside of the bed and slowly leaned forward to look over. The closer I got, the more could I feel someone's breathing there, but there was nothing down there. "It's just a trick of the eyes, sweetheart. Don't be afraid," I reassured Sophie, but immediately her innocent brown eyes stared back at me widely. I jumped up and screamed aloud, picked Sophie up, and dashed toward the door. Feeling something was amiss with my daughter, I stopped and took a closer look. Sophie's eye sockets were deep red, blood streaming down her small face and over her white dress. The eyes that I just saw under the bed were of Sophie. I pushed Sophie away, sank to the floor, and screamed in fear. The door swung open. Logan rushed in with Sophie in his arms, looking at me panikedly. I looked at Sophie, and then back at the image on the floor. It had disappeared. Rushing over to Sophie, I hugged her tightly, then checked on her face carefully. Logan said that Sophie had been in the shed with him since I left, so it was all in my head, stressed up and tired. It was still in a mess after all this time, ever since my husband passed away. After I calmed down, Logan told me to go to the shed. He had something he wanted me to see. The woman's eyes in the painting had been repaired by Logan. However, near her face, some paint had chipped away, revealing one eye. That eye was so familiar, yet I couldn't recognize it. What was hidden behind the perfection of this painting? Logan said he was creeped out by the woman's gaze, feeling as though he was being watched. Although I had the same feeling as Logan, I didn't told him about it. Instead, I told him to fix the painting quickly by tomorrow, and I would happily pay him extra. I just wanted to leave this house as soon as possible and wouldn't mind pushing anything further. That night, I woke up to find Sophie not beside me, I hurriedly searched for her. I checked the bathroom, living room, and kitchen, but couldn't find Sophie anywhere. Remembering what happened this morning, I ran down to the storage to look for Sophie. As I opened the door and stepped in, I avoided the creepy gaze from the painting and called my daughter's name. "Mom!" Sophie's voice called out from deep within the shed. I had never been inside this shed before. All I knew was that it housed hundreds of my father's paintings, and I had always tried my best to not been too curious about them. Through the dim light of my phone's flashlight, I found Sophie. She was trembling and clung tightly upon coming close to me. Just as we turned to leave, I shone the light ahead. That woman's face without eyes suddenly appeared. I screamed and held Sophie tightly. A few seconds later, nothing else happened. I took a deep breath and continued to shine the flashlight ahead. This time, it was a woman with bruised skin, smiling, but smeared all over with red blood. I was startled at that, yet I was sane enough to cover Sophie's eyes with my hand. And this time, I decided to come closer to look at that person again. It seemed she was the same as the woman without eyes in the picture I had seen earlier. I fumbled in the darkness searching for the switch to turn on the lights. As soon as the lights came on, I was shocked to see many horrific images surrounding me. There were dozens of paintings depicting that very same woman, each showing different brutal methods of torture. The two horrifying women I had seen earlier were among the paintings here. Each painting clearly recorded the date and time it was created, accompanied by my father's familiar signature. One painting marked the last date as June 13th, 2023, featuring the beautiful brown eyes. I easily recognized that the woman in the paintings here was the same as the one in the painting Logan was fixing. What's peculiar is that the woman in these paintings, despite being tortured, still had beautifully painted eyes that were meticulously done. Sophie's cries jolted me out of my trance of thoughts. I took her back to the room, and Sophie quickly fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up early. The first thing I did was return to the shed. I scraped the paint off the painting. Behind that strange eye, a man's face emerged. It was my father. I used both hands to scrape off all the paint, destroying the valuable painting. Another painting appeared. The woman, tightly bound with chains, was being strangled by my father pulling one end. Despite the blood oozing out from her broken body, her beautiful brown eyes were still glaring coldly from her disfigured face. I sought out Benny. I wanted to learn about my father's life when I wasn't around. It took a long time to convince him, and finally, Benny told me the whole truth. My father had a special passion with women's eyes. After many years of searching, he found Donna, the model for the woman in the paintings. Donna was both his lover and his model for all the paintings. Gradually, my father's personality changed. He became more and more possessive and controlling. He realized that the only thing he wanted was Donna's eyes. He once told Benny, "The most beautiful eyes of a woman are when they are in pain." The images in the shed were the continuous tortures he inflicted on Donna, and what remained in the end was the eyes, the thing he desired the most. The day Benny called me to inform me of my father's passing was the day he discovered my father in the shed, slumped aside the painting of Donna's eyes. My father died in a slumped position, with both hands holding his own eyes. I burned all of my father's paintings along with his painting tools. I took Sophie back to San Jose and put my father's house up for sale. I didn't want to keep anything related to my father or his terrifying works. Only true art deserves to exist.
My twin sister and I have a terrifying secret. I'm Robert, and my twin sister is Laura. Our family of 4 lives in a mobile home. We move every day along the roads through towns, cities, and states. My parents always choose empty lots or wooded areas for the family to spend the night. My sibling and I didn't attend school like other children. Instead, we followed an online program. It may sound deprived and unfortunate, but my family was still very happy for 13 years. One evening, after our parents went to sleep, my sibling and I snuck into the forest to play. Because we spent 90% of our time in the van, we were very curious about everything around us. Laura clutched the hem of her shirt tightly, following closely behind as I held the flashlight to light our way. The sudden rustling sounds of leaves being disturbed startled us. We stood frozen for a moment until a growling sound signaled the approach of a large and terrifying creature. I grabbed Laura's hand tightly and ran with all my strength without looking back. Miraculously, my sister and I made it back into the house safely without our parents noticing. We absolutely kept that secret from our parents. The mobile life of the family continued as usual. One day, I told my parents during dinner that I wanted to settle down somewhere. I want to go to school, have more friends, and sleep on a big bed in my own room. My parents looked at me silent for a long time. Do you still remember what happened when the two of you were just 4 years old? Mom asked gently. We don't want that to happen again. We won't be able to live if we lose you two. When my twin sister and I were 4 years old, while the family stopped to play at a park, we almost got kidnapped by a man. Since that incident, our parents have been more vigilant about us, and rules were established for us. Laura didn't say anything, although I knew she also shared the same desire as I did. I remained silent, although I was not satisfied or comfortable. Several months passed with our mobile life until my sibling and I were about to celebrate our 15th birthday. That day, my parents parked the car in an empty lot and instructed my sibling and me to stay put in the car until they returned. Laura tidied up the car to decorate for the birthday, while I lounged on the bed with my gaming console. A moment later, Laura called me urgently. "Robert, come here quickly." Laura was sitting next to an old box with some papers in her hands. The box was something my dad used to prop up the driver's seat every day, and I thought the papers were just some kind of advertisements. But Laura handed them to me with a very serious expression. That was our birth certificate, but our parents' names were Owen Taylor and Anna Taylor, while our current parents are Maria and Louis. There were also a few old newspapers. June 13, 2000. A case of 2 missing twin children under 6 months old received significant attention. November 20th, 2000. The mother of the 2 children, after months of desperately searching for her kids, went insane. The father did not give up. He was willing to pay any price and do whatever it took to find his children. April 4th, 2004. The father, after many years of searching, accidentally encountered the 2 children in a park. With the identifying features, he was certain they were his 2 children. However, the kidnappers attacked him and took them away. Once again, the man fell into despair as he lost his children for the second time. There is a hand-drawn sketch of the 2 kidnappers in the article, and it's shocking how much it resembles our current parents by about 70%. An article also included a letter that the father wrote to his 2 children. "Dear Robert and Laura, my beloved children, I don't know where you are right now, but remember that your parents always love you. I will try to find you and bring you back, so please stay healthy." I looked at Laura. Her eyes were red and her body trembled from shock. I didn't think much, grabbing Laura's hand, and ran out of the car, running fast and far to a police station to ask for help. We were kept at the police station for our safety. Laura couldn't stop crying. I knew she was very scared. That very night, a man came to the police station. He looked at us for a long time before kneeling down and bursting into tears. He was our biological father. Our adoptive parents were wanted and captured 2 days later after going into hiding. It was difficult, with feelings of guilt and regret, as we had reported the people who had taken care of us for 15 years. But according to the police, we would soon have been sold by that couple as valuable goods. My brother and I were taken back to our hometown in Ohio, living in the spacious house we had long dreamed of. Although there are still distances and unfamiliarity, we will gradually adjust because we know that this place truly has the love of family.